All right. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ask Me Anything About Video Signals. Kind of thinking this might be the last episode. So we've done about, I think, 6 or 7 of these so far since we got started here. And yeah, it's been pretty good. The main thing is I'm just not getting questions. I got probably 3 questions, and doing this 6 times means that for the most part I end up having to kind of like prepare something to talk about, which I guess I didn't really think that's what this was going to be. But you know, either way, that's how it goes. We try things out, see how it works, and if this format isn't really making a difference, then yeah, move on to something else. So yeah, what's up, Josie? Welcome to the chat. But yeah, I mean, the whole thing, the reason I kind of started this format of the Ask Me Anything is that, like, in general, like, over the last 2 years of my life, I noticed there's just, like, lots of people asking me questions kind of everywhere, digitally. So, like, you know, just, like, people commenting questions on many different social media things, and it was or asking things on just, like, you know, like, at a certain point, I've got an account, I've got an Instagram account, I have a Facebook account, which I doesn't really check like 2 times a year, Reddit account, the Scanlines account, a Discord account, YouTube, and probably like 10 more things I'm forgetting about. And like, there's a point maybe about 2 years ago where I noticed I'd spend like a full, like, you know, like 8-hour day just like responding to comments and like questions, in addition to catching up with emails and all that other bullshit. And I was just kind of like, yeah, this is not a very efficient way to do it, because, you know, like, 80% of the questions are the same questions over and over again. So I was just like, well, how about if I I had a Snapchat for like I used a Snapchat for like 2 days, I think, way back in the day. Um, so I was just like, I don't know, just I tried to figure out how to get everyone just to message me on email, and I'm just like, I'll respond to every single email I get. But just decided to say not responding to comments anymore, not responding to messages on like many disparate platforms, because like if you respond to one, then you have to respond to all of them. And it's just like this fucking snowball thing of just like how much time can one person spend answering the same 10 questions on like 12 different platforms on a regular basis. So I thought the one thing I tried out first was just doing like the AMA on my Discord. So I would sign into the Video Synthesis Ecosphere Discord like once or twice a year and just be like, for the next 12 hours, I will pay close attention to every question asked in this channel and I'll answer them all. And I thought that worked really nice. And then when we started doing this polyphase thing, I wanted to try to do some kind of regular talk thing, but I wanted it to be something that didn't require any homework on my part. So I figured doing like a regular talk and like just giving people a chance to ask questions in advance or ask questions here would be like a good thing for just all the general like, how do I do this with my video mixer? How do I do this with my video camera, etc., kind of thing. But of course, the hard thing is just to get people to ask questions. Like, I don't know, people, it seems like a lot of people these days are like very sort of just like, what they want from like an online presence is they want to be fed. They don't want to have a conversation. And I'm doing my best not to like turn into this cranky old man who's like, kids these days don't ask questions or whatever. And it's not that I don't think people ask questions. People ask tons of questions all the time. The question is like, how do you present like this online thing where everyone sort of takes it for granted that this is just like, I'm going to decide to do things and throw them at you. How do you take that kind of mentality and then flip it around to like, yeah, this is deliberately set up as a conversation that is responsive to what y'all's want. So yeah, that's kind of like, that's really the only thing I prepared for today. And I'm pretty much at the point where I'm just like, yeah, if I get no questions, then I'll keep doing some kind of regular talk thing, but it's probably not going to be this. Or I'll do something else. Let's see, I can talk a little bit about some future projects I'm working on. Top secret, I can't give you any more information than this, but I am working on a video art festival. That's about it. That should be pretty cool. I should be able to like make some announcements about that in the next month or two. So yeah, I'm gonna be doing with the phase shift. This will be an in-person dealio, so that should be pretty sick. Online stuff is great, but like that's not really. I do a lot of stuff online. We all do a lot of stuff online. So many people probably have to work and do school online. Like, let's have real human being meetups as well. Let's see, there's that thing. Paloma Cop and I, as Phase Shift, are working on some a little mini tour this summer, doing some events kind of in the central United States. There's a whole big area we kind of skipped last year when we did our nationwide tour. So we're looking at Iowa City, Kansas City, Oklahoma City, maybe Denver, maybe Central Illinois, kind of places right in sort of like close to Highway 35, close to the Mississippi, that kind of thing. So that'll be this summer. Let's see, maybe we'll go to Canada at some point too. Toronto and Montreal are pretty easily accessible. Let's see, another project I'm working on, which it's not that I can't say anything about it, it's just we haven't decided on a lot of things about it, but we're working on sort of like a live streaming, an independent sort of like more entertainment based like video art centered live streaming platform. called subcarrier.tv. So we're sort of in talks to like figure out the what's going to start happening with that. We'll probably start doing, and this is going to be more like, not like, this isn't really going to be so much like a YouTube channel where there's like live streams and then there's like a bunch of like content just there for you to watch all the time. This is going to be like only stuff that's kind of programmed, so it's treating like a streaming server thing like it's just like a public access show. So we're gonna have folks doing like programming blocks and stuff like that. So it'll be some pre-recorded stuff and then some live stuff. I think probably about half and half pre-recorded and half live things. And that's probably where I'm gonna put the energy that I've been putting into these. I'll put that into the subcarrier thing for a minute. Well, thanks. Josie says, reminds me of recursive news. That was, that was a lot of fun to make. That was fuck ton of work, but like one of the most like, I don't know, strangely one of the most cohesive things we've done together as a group. Let's see, what else is happening in plans? I'm working on the Gravity Waves save states and Gravity Waves macros. That should be pretty much ready to beta test in a couple weeks. I mean, like, it's not really like a waste of my time if I'm, Quality Apology says, definitely always interested in future plans. It's hard to know what to ask that isn't just a waste of your time if they can just look it up elsewhere. It's like, the thing about this is it's not really a waste of my time if I'm putting the time to do it. And also, like, there's a difference between looking things up and asking people for questions. This is something I noticed a lot when I was learning, when I've learned anything, really, is like, so when you look things up, what you get is this sort of, like, institutionalized bureaucratic version of knowledge. So if something's made it into a textbook or a reference book, it's usually been kind of scrubbed of like nuance, and it's the very sort of like the bare bones version of like whatever truth you need to access. So looking things up is kind of like, that's the bureaucratic way of doing it. And then there's the vernacular way of like obtaining information, which is just asking someone who's done it, and they're going to tell you the specific context. They're going to tell you very context specific information. So like the kind of difference there, which I think is a very important difference, is like it's the difference between asking Google Maps to give you directions somewhere and asking someone who lives in the city that you're asking for directions on how to get somewhere. They'll both probably tell you how to get to the same place, but Google Maps is not going to know very specific things, like if you try to make a left turn on Ash Street at 3 p.m., you're going to be stuck there for 10 minutes because that's when the Tektronix plant gets out and like the school buses are coming around. So don't go that way at that time. So there's like a huge value to the vernacular approach to like giving information, which is sort of like, we have a very like, our society, American society, is very, very like focused on the sort of mysticism of bureaucratization of everything. Everything should be kind of like stale, sterile, scrubbed. It should not look like it was created by a human being, and it should have no specific context, no specific relevant context. Whereas like if we think about it, this in science, people used to write science papers. You read science papers from even like 200 years ago, they're written in the first person, and they like describe sort of like very specific contexts of where they are and how they're doing the experiment. And then I think this is probably around the same time with like Bourbaki's school of mathematics. You have the sort of transformation of science into, you have to write a science paper. There's a very specific way. You're actually not enforced. Nobody like specifically says these are rules, but you have to write it sort of like in the third person passive. Like all of these things just happen. Like the experimenter, if I'm the experimenter, I'm not doing anything. These things just sort of kind of happened. It's kind of the same way like when you get like delivery notifications. They're written in this like third person passive thing, like your package was delivered, not that fucking Steve delivered your package. A human being put the work in delivering your package. So like there's a very strong political like bend in the whole bureaucratization of information. And it's primarily about like hiding labor and hiding the important sort of context specific information that like makes it actually matter in a very useful way. Um, and the sort of like the long and short term of that is that you just like lose a lot of valuable like context specific information that you actually need to operate in a useful way. So yeah, like I said, if I don't get any prompts, I'm just gonna like it's just gonna be rants that go into politics. But there's like so this enormous value to vernacular information. It's information that comes from experience and has like very specific like use cases involved, as opposed to like the really clean and scrubbed stuff. Um, yeah. I mean, UK and US are definitely not. We're not the same cultures. There's a lot of overlaps. There's a lot of really surprising like divergences as well. But the bureaucracy, if you look at bureaucracy, it was United Kingdom, Germany, and the United States who were the big sort of like cultural like adopters of like this mythical idea of like the bureaucratic like bureaucratical approach to everything. And it's kind of like no coincidence that like those were the three of the main powers that like fought in like the huge world wars in the last like 100 years. Um, Also, like the Soviet Union too was a very bureaucratic society in like a slightly different way. They were kind of the one society to really sort of like run off with like the very techno utopian Buckminster Fuller adoption like branch of like bureaucratic like utopias, which was really interesting and like failed in horrible ways for like many people. But going back to vernacular versus like scrubbed information, this is also like a critique I've gotten in the manuals that I write for the instruments I make. I've had a number of people like directly. I had one person directly email me once saying, "I write manuals for a living, and your manuals are awful." This is probably because my manuals are filled with typos. They're written in a conversational tone of voice. There's weird digressions and like really stupid jokes everywhere. There's images that I obviously did not clear with anyone that I just grabbed off the internet and like links to like bullshit all over the place. And that's it's basically because like you're not reading the manual every time you play the instrument. Like you should read it once or twice. It should be like sort of like feel like having that sort of conversational thing like gives it a completely different experience than having the sort of like I don't know, you read like some synthesizer manuals and it's just like it's obviously just like copy pasta of like the same thing because like it's just menu things over and over again, and it's like it's really hard. It's hard to juggle that kind of information when it's like so abstract. That's just for me. Yeah, so guess we're kind of wrapping up on what I have to rant about here. Any other future plans? Working on like a custom controller. This is sort of more of a long-term thing, but Paloma and I are working on custom controllers for my instruments. And these would also be like they would be DIY, open source, fully available to build and modify on your own. We're working sort of like we're kind of like jumping back even from like USB MIDI and just working with like QMK as like sort of a programming like the way that like the information's gonna work. QMK is called Quantum Mechanical Keyboard, and it's just like an open source protocol for like making your own clicky keyboards. So if you've seen anyone's seen the Gravity Waves keypad thing, that's an out of the box thing I get from the really cool store on AliExpress that makes a whole bunch of mechanical keyboards. but we're gonna basically start working on designing our own. The nice thing about those is that like you can like every one of those like keycaps there, if we're designing our own, could also be like a rotary encoder. So rotary instead of potentiometer, so you can spin infinitely, and it could also have like press, so you could have like knobs you spin and you press them. QMK, I think also you can make stuff that is compatible with US with the USB MIDI, so you can have it be sort of also just like sending kind of keystroke information, which like literally like just about every program you ever use can respond to keystrokes in some way, and like you can macro them like the same way you can do. I'm using OBS right here. Um, but yeah, that's sort of like a long-term goal, and we're kind of maybe hoping to have something like that out for people to sort of test out in the next year or so. Quality Apology writes in the chat, custom controller sounds interesting. Have you seen the standalone wave pool someone made and posted? Um, I have, yeah. They sent me that in an email, and I said, you have to share this because this looks amazing. They showed me. It looks like kind of like it basically was like a wave pool built out to look like a mini Moog kind of thing with like big chunky potentiometers and like nice like kind of like the sort of like slanted up like wooden sideboard things. All right. Oh, we got a question. Alex, do you have any general advice on teaching our youth? Our daughter is almost 3 and loves when we play around with gravity waves. Um, well, I don't have kids. I have a lot of friends who have kids. I have nieces and nephews and stuff like that. So like taking that into account, I don't really like know that much about childcare or like how did kids learn or anything. But just speaking vaguely in terms of like what do I just like what's my gut feeling and what I notice is like I guess for kids it's just kind of about like letting them loose as much as possible, and then just like but giving them a restricted sort of area to play with. So like I feel like giving a child the gravity waves is kind of messy, but if you just like open it up and set it to one specific mode and give them the knobs to play with, like if you just do some feedback and they can see that the camera is pointed at them and it's like responding to that, so they get this intuitive knowledge of like this is happening, I'm controlling this, and then set like the feedback controls on the MIDI controller to just be like geometry stuff. Like when I've given my synths to play with when I've seen little kids play with my synths before, usually the geometry stuff and like seeing them bob around and sort of like be able to like sort of physically paint things with their motion is usually like very very exciting. Um, so yeah, letting them like giving them setting them up with like a restricted kind of thing to play with, and then just like letting them like go wild. I guess that's the best thing. I can ask some friends. I've given some instruments away to my friends' kids before, so I can see I can maybe do like come back to that later. Wheeze asks, what's the status of vSerpy? I've been playing with Recur. Can you just replace the SD card with an image of the apps? The status of VSER Pi is, so the vSerpies only currently run on Pi, the like a third, like 2 generations ago Raspberry Pis, the Raspberry Pi 3B. And then, and we're in end of life production of Raspberry Pi 3B. So the sort of big hurdle for me of like porting these things to anything else is, I mean, the biggest hurdle is just time. Like, how much fucking time do I have to do this kind of thing? Like, and it's always just like one other thing. It's like there's just always this thing in my life where there's just like one slightly more like important thing I have to do to make money before I can get to the next thing that I have to do to maybe make money in like a year from now. So it's always like I'm always just kind of focusing on the thing that I need to make money in the next 3 months, and I haven't really been able to get myself to a place where I could just like not stress about making money and be like, I can work on a project that might make me money in a year or so. And that is like a really important part of all this stuff, is that like these are income generators for me. And I've been the with like sales being kind of shitty, and with like my general dissatisfaction with like hyping and selling things online. Um, my long term plans are not to continue to like sell videos, like to design, manufacture, and sell video synthesizers as a full time job. Like, if it's something I can do that's sort of like it lives on the back burner, and I can do it like once a year and like work on like things that are like more fulfilling to me as a human being, instead of like, and not have to just like advertise things and like perform this sort of like magical act of conjuring everyone into like wanting to ask me questions about like people keep trying to like this thing when I used to sell all the time. People always just wanted to talk to me about like get me to talk them into buying something. And I find that really obnoxious. Like, I was doing like, I do like art shows. Here's an art installation, and someone would show up and just be like, "What's that? That's the thing you're selling? Tell me all about it." And I'm just like, yeah, that's not what we're doing here. Like, this isn't like a sales floor. This isn't a sales pitch. Like, check out what it's doing. There's tons of information available online that has been created already. But I'm not really in, it's just not enjoyable for me to like hype things constantly. Like at this point, I'm probably the worst person to ask about like why, if your question is why should you buy something I make, I'm just gonna fucking tell you build it yourself. They're really really easy. I don't really want to be doing it that much anymore, and just like like give me donations or sign up for the Patreon, or just don't even bother. Like it's all good at this point. So yeah, it all has to make money. For me to like spend like the amount of time that it takes to port something into it, and it's just like always a question of like, do I have the time? Like I spent like probably a good 6 weeks trying to port things to Raspberry Pi 4s, and I couldn't get anything past like screen tearing, which is a huge pain in the ass. I have a Raspberry Pi 5 now, and like so far I haven't gotten like I haven't gotten my versions of the apps to run out of the box yet. But I'm gonna try. Yeah, I sort of have like a day scheduled every week to work on like a little side project. So I'm gonna see if we can get things running on the Pi. But as far as I can tell right now, the development platform I have right now is the VSE Jet. And that's the main focus. That's the main thing I'm going to focus on, because like it exists right now. I have a platform. It doesn't take me any time to sort of like, I don't have to invest any more time to develop apps on it. I can just develop the things on there. So that's going to be all the vSerpy stuff is going to get ported over to the VSE Jet. That's going to be the main thing. If I can figure out how to get things running on the Pi 5, that's great. Otherwise, I'm looking. I've set up a little development platform for a completely different set of things on the Pi. Which one is it called? Pi Nano. So those are the really itty bitty ones, and that would be that wouldn't be ports. That would just be an entirely different set of things. And that's something I'm thinking about. Just making very very minimal video synths. That would just kind of go along. The first controllers that like Paloma and I are going to work on are these just like really minimal controllers. So we're just thinking minimal videos, minimal analog video synth, minimal controllers, like just kind of go in the exact opposite direction that I went with Gravity Waves, where it's like huge, complicated, and a gigantic mess, and you need a GUI to do everything, and just kind of like go way back to like the beginning of stuff. And work on something that like is something that like a 3-year-old can play just as easily as a 43-year-old. So I guess that's the future of the VSER Pi. And as always, my ability to kind of develop these things is like it's how much time do I have, and how much time I have is dependent on how much money do I need to make to survive at any moment. So really supporting the Patreon is kind of the way to go with that long term. I'm trying to do this thing in the Patreon where I like make one video that people want per month, until maybe we get like more of a monthly income from that. And once there's more monthly income from the Patreon, then we can talk about specific development projects we can work on. So like that's sort of the main path for that. Otherwise, like maybe the economy shifts and like I'm able to sell a lot more synthesizers without like having to work very hard. That would be nice. Politically speaking, I don't really see that happening in the next 2 years. Best case scenario is the economy stays similar to it is right now, but like this is an election year, and this is kind of a fucked up election, so I've got no prophecies on that. Okay. Are we going to see Spectral Mesh ported to the Jetson Nano? Eventually, yes. Spectral Mesh is the one... Well, Spectral Mesh and Phosphorm are sort of the two sort of like outliers of like the VSRP, where it's not quite so... long story short, they're not quite so plug and play to like put them over. I'd have to rewrite a chunk of Spectral Mesh, and in order to rewrite it, I need to go back and understand what I actually did in the code there, because like I haven't really like doing that very specific Spectral Mesh thing in the way that I did it using like video buffer objects. Different, so it's not really a frame buffer synth. Spectral Mesh is the one of those VSRPs that isn't really kind of frame buffer based in one way or the other. It's video, it's about buffering vertexes and working with just like the points on there and then mapping video onto those points. And I just don't have the same level of just like expertise and experience with that I do with just like straight up frame buffer stuff, so I do have to go back there, relearn how to do it, and then fix up a port for that. So yeah, eventually it'll get there, but I just had a map of how much time I have to work on the ports stuff this spring, and didn't really seem like that was on the immediate buffer. What kind of work is bringing me fulfillment and interest these days? Well, I do really like just like my favorite thing to do with development is just like fuck around and experiment, which is something that you kind of have to do a lot in order to like make new synths. But it's something that you don't really get to do that much once you have a business, because you're mostly just like updating and maintaining. I like teaching in real life a lot. Teaching online, which I've been doing, is like, it's honestly like it's like don't get me wrong, it's very helpful, like, and it's like it's kind of, in the grand scheme of things, it's a great job. It's a great like hourly wage for someone like me. But the teaching online thing is like, it's also like somewhat like it's you lose so much of the energy and enthusiasm and interest, and you have to put, for me anyway, I have to put like honestly about 2 to 4 times as much like energy into teaching a group of 10 people online that I would into teaching 10 people in real life, just because you have to like overly emphasize everything and really just like struggle against the fact that you're just like a 2-dimensional like stuttering glitching image with a severely frequency restricted voice, speaking with like a 1.5 second delay to a group of people, some of whom might be driving in a car, or I think I've had students in some of my classes who are literally taking another class, physically in another class at the same time, but had their like phone up to like take my class too. So people who might be distracted and might not be there. And then at the end, you're just like, oh, okay, bye, click, silence, and you're just like, wow, I'm completely drained of energy now. And it's like the thing when you do like online performances, or you do a performance in real life and then people applaud and everyone's just like, wow, that's great, and you're like in this room full of people and you can like sense that like everyone's stoked. Same thing happens when you teach class. You finish it up and you still got a room full of people around, and you know, you might shoot the shit with someone. And then you end like an online class and it's just kind of like, Now I'm alone with my exhaustion. So it's like, it's great and it's really frustrating. So still kind of working on ways to like make that more fulfilling, but like teaching in real life is great. I like organizing events a lot. That's sort of why I'm sort of working on the larger event I spoke on. Just because I feel like I'm particularly good at like kind of like getting people together, getting people motivated, and like making large scale things happen. One of my sort of secret skills. Tom asks, what's the importance of picking a platform rather than targeting like Mac, Windows, Linux? Not quite sure what this is asking. So picking a platform, do you mean, Tom, do you mean like picking a platform like single board computers, like picking the Raspberry Pi or the Jetson Nano kind of thing? Um, we can talk for a little bit. So like targeting, when you have to like working on cross-platform code, which I did for a while with the desktop video wave suite. You kind of really need a team to do that properly, and it really kind of like, like a lot of people sort of like think like, oh, software developers now that like are asking for like, like for you to like subscribe and pay them sort of monthly or like annually, they think, oh, what a fucking ripoff. Like, you just make the software and you give it to me and I use it all the time. And some of them probably are just ripping you off. Like, no joke. Some of them have to deal with the fact that they're forced to sell the platform. They're forced to sell their software through like, if it's on a phone, they have to sell it through like that fucking walled garden thing where someone's taking 35% of their cut and and hiding, shadow banning their stuff if it's like competes with their own things or all this other bullshit. But like designing an app and making sure it continues to run on every single person who's working with like a relatively modern version of that software, like that's insane actually if you think about it. Like, because you have to be like staying up on all the updates. Like, if you're like just OS X, for example, I don't think any of my shit works on like modern OS X's because like, one, I don't have the fucking hardware to even run the modern software the way that most people have it on. um, it's like expensive, it's time consuming, it's kind of insane. um, and that's kind of why like I've moved so much of my focus to this single board computer thing, because it's like I can't really tell everyone who wants to run my like desktop suite, hey, um, stick with Windows 10 security update patch 2.5 from 2020, and then everything will work great for you for the rest of your life. But don't update anything. Don't do. I can't say to everyone with like an Apple computer that yeah, stick with just Mojave. Mojave's great. Never update past that because like you use your computer for other things. Anybody who's like doing like video editing or image editing or anything like that, and you're doing that commercially, like you pretty much have to be working on the latest operating system and the latest version of whatever like suite you're running. Um, so keeping that in mind, like it is kind of a nightmare to do the development and like keep everything stable on like a cross-platform world. And being able to develop for just the single board computers, it's like, yeah, like the vSerpy, they ran on an incredibly, even when they first came out, they were running on an incredibly outdated like Raspbian operating system, but like who the fuck cares? Like, it's Raspbian. Like, and nobody would ever really have to be like, oh, if you want to run like a modern version of Raspbian on your vSerpy, just like swap out the SD card. It's not quite so easy to just like, I mean, it is pretty easy actually to like swap out your hard drives on a computer and like run like boot from like multiple things. But like it's not really easy to deliver that to people in a package or to like set that up for people to open source. Um, I have sort of thought about creating like a little like for people to run on desktop computers, either like a Linux virtual machine or like some sort of like bootable like video waves drive that you could like, and it would just sort of like launch you into like Ubuntu and then run like gravity wave stuff or video wave stuff from there. That would be sort of my like first stab at like one-click installers for like the desktop apps. But yeah, designing for the single board computers mean that you can just like work with a static situation that works every time. And it's never going to try to update on you in the middle of a live show, and you don't have to like deal with like the weird licensing bullshit of like accessing like SDK kits from like the whatever like new Windows like development paradigm thing they're dealing with. Um, yeah, Tom says I love the bootable drive. I would totally do that. Whenever I bring that up with like computer folks, though, they're just like, I'm not putting some random fucking USB drive in my computer. Like, what are you like? What are you like? What kind of hacker like nefarious bullshit are you trying to pull here? So it would be like, it would be quite frankly like potentially it could offer like some severe security risks. The whole booting from USB disks thing. I mean, I don't really give a shit about like, I'm not gonna try to like steal anyone's anything, but like somebody else could very easily hijack the bootable disk thing, and like do like kind of sketchy things with that. So like, the yeah. Well, it's just about like it would be something people probably end up just passing around to one another too. So like, not that I'm like set. That's not like the reason I would never do it, but it's just whenever I bring that up to like my more like security conscious like hackery and sysadmin friends, they're just like, "Don't fucking do that. Don't do that. Not a good idea." And I'm just like, okay. Well, I could put it on an optical disc, right? I could put it on like 16 floppy disks. That's pretty secure because, I mean, like no one, this the whole the good old fashioned security through obscurity method of like who's gonna go out of their way to like try to like pop some like hacky some like system wide hack onto a floppy disk distro. No one. Let's see, do we have any more questions? Does any VSE Jet software leverage specific features of the Jetson and Nano? I looked it up after building Gravity Waves, and it seems to be targeted at AI edge stuff, which got me curious. So, yeah, I mean, basically, so what a Jetson Nano is compared to a Raspberry Pi. So Jetson Nano and Raspberry Pi are both single board computers, and they're both sort of like they come out of this world of like development boards, where so like the Raspberry Pi isn't really a dev kit anymore, but it sort of comes from this world of you get like a little dev board where you'd be testing out the features of the CPU, and that's why you have like a GPIO thing on there, and you'd be testing it out because you'd be making your own custom board and like I/O set to make some kind of device that runs that the whatever that Broadcom CPU that like the Raspberry Pi used to use. But they just kind of like it became like such a community like oriented thing that it's like I don't think it was ever intended as like a dev kit, but it's from that sort of like dev board kind of like world. The Jetson Nano is NVIDIA's dev board for their series of like what's basically it's just basically NVIDIA is one of the largest graphics cards manufacturers in the world. Most GPUs are created by and manufactured by NVIDIA. Them and AMD, I think, are the really the main games in town that I'm aware of. Let's see. What was I gonna? I got distracted there. So, the Jetson Nano is a giant, beefy graphics card. Well, it's not really. It is. It's not beefy like in terms of like, oh, this is like compared to like what's running on my desktop computer right now, which is kind of an insane graphics card because I'm a nerd. But it's beefy in terms of like if you look at just the device, the size and the weight of it, it is really just it's a GPU with a tiny little bit of CPU capability on it, which for video synthesis stuff that's pretty great. You've got 4 gigs of RAM on there. That's a fuck ton of memory that you can use as like pretty much like as video RAM. And the whole things are designed like the main people who I think use the Jetson, like different kind of like Jetson stuff for their devices, are working with like real time video and doing AI on that in some way. And they're doing like robotics, security cameras. There was a brief splurge of people using them for like Bitcoin mining. So like very GPU intensive things. That's what the nanos were. The whole Jetson like single board computer world is sort of based around. So like the moment I found out about those, which was very shortly after I started the Raspberry Pi thing, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be the next thing. Because, like, I mean, the trade-off is no direct analog input, but on the other hand, you can do very high resolutions and, like, you can do crazy amounts of delay and you can do some pretty insane video stuff on there in high resolution. So it's just kind of like an obvious trade-off. It was also about like 10 times as much work to do that because you'll notice from the start, I mean, I didn't tell anyone when I first started working on it, but it was about probably like 3-year turnaround from the first time I started trying to create a development environment on the Nano to when I finished it up. So, you know, a little bit of like kernel editing had to go in there at some point and all this nonsense. Shit, we got a lot of questions in here. Let's see. A lot of people saying I should try the bootable drive thing. Well, that's probably all I really needed is something to offset all of my hacker friends telling me not to fucking do that. Start playing on that maybe this summer. All video games used to boot directly. Oh, yeah. I mean, everything used to have to be booted from the command line. I'm old enough to remember that. Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. How do you provide with the questions? Yeah, you can ask them here. The other place to ask questions is, I'm going to give y'all a link here. So if you email Polyphase Portal, I think we're coming to the end of this one here. If folks want to email your questions to Polyphase Portal, that's where we keep like a queue of stuff for the future ones. Let's see, Root Notes says, we're looking at a future where GPU targets are diverging. Will you continue to work in open frameworks, and do you think you'll need to specialize in one of these frameworks? That's a great question. Vulkan makes the most sense out of everything I've looked at going forward. In terms of support, it seems to be, I mean, Vulkan just seems to make the most sense. It also seems like it's going to be a bit of like a step sideways and downwards. Other things I'm working on would be, in terms of like working mainly with open frameworks, at this point I'm pretty open and I've experimented with like other frameworks for doing the graphic stuff. Open frameworks is great because at this point I've been using it long enough that I just have my own personal library of shit that I can work with. Same thing with like GLSL. I've got my own personal libraries of everything that I'm like don't have to like learn a lot of new things every time. So it's awesome if I can just use that shit. But yeah, realistically going forward, I'm not sure how much I can use like for the Raspberry Pi stuff. I want to keep working on Raspberry Pi 5. At like a certain point, it just might make a lot more sense to like start over, not port things, and just do stuff with like, I've been working on a little bit of stuff that's just with Python and OpenGL instead of GLSL. So no like shader code, but just OpenGL calls and stuff like that. So that's one possible way I would be working in. If I can figure out some like Vulkan, some sort of like framework for just doing like analog I/O with Vulkan stuff, I'd be totally into that. Um, I really try not to specialize in things because it's just like when you specialize in something that only works in one thing, it's kind of like it can be quite crippling in the long run. So I mean, working with like C++ and GLSL, the ultimately like that shit runs on everything. And for the foreseeable future, like, I mean, C++ isn't going anywhere. GLSL will probably get phased out in my lifetime. As to how soon that happens, it could be like 10 years or something. That would be my guess, 5-10 years. That like something else, probably Vulkan, replaces it. Rust would be interesting to work with instead of C++, but like, it's always just about time. Like I can, I've never like taken really the time to teach myself Python, but Python is just like literally the easiest fucking language anyone has ever created for programming in. So if all I'm using it for is just like tapping frame buffers and like getting control information in and out and maybe calling like a GStreamer thing, like Python, not a lot of effort to learn. Rust, tons of effort to learn. Vulkan, tons of effort to learn. So I mean, my ideal situation is just like, would just be like, if I had to leave open frameworks behind, to at the very least be still working with C++ in some form, just because then you've got something that you can pretty easily like run on anything. But yeah, I'm gonna try not to specialize in things, and I'm really not an early adopter of anything. I like to wait and see how things play out. But seeing how Vulkan has been playing out, it feels like that's kind of like where we'd be going at some point. So I think we're gonna wrap up this episode. This was actually really great questions here. So yeah, I'll keep doing these for the rest of the schedule. Seems like this worked out pretty well. If I just fill time with ranting for like 15 minutes, that'll get people in. So, let's see. So all the other questions here. Let's see if I can get anything quickly. Wave pool ports for VSE Jet. Brad, yeah, eventually everything that doesn't require like an audio ADC or DAC will be ported. The ones that I have that are in beta testing right now is Wavepool HD, Artificial Life HD, Temporal Vortex HD, and Chromatic Aberration HD. So those are the main ones that I've got right now. Spectral Mesh will take a little bit longer. And Rotor, let's see if I can answer this one quick. Analog way to come up with printable CMYK channels created from an analog video signal. I think what you probably want, and these things exist, there are video printers out there. And these video printers, I think you could probably tap into and get the CMYK like data out of it as just like bit streams. So I don't know like how relevant that is, but like you can look up just like color video. Panasonic and Sony made a whole bunch of these where you could just like, you'd feed it like a live analog video signal and you'd be able to print screenshots of that, and like many of them are really very high quality, like nice prints. But inside of the hardware of that, you've got something that's already sort of like doing that on a microchip, so that would be a good place to start. All right. But yeah, I'm gonna have to end this one. Thanks everybody for your questions. Email us at polyphase.portal. I am gonna have to like switch the date of this next one, I think, so I might just move it to the Tuesday before. And that'll be, I mean, I doubt most people followed this on the calendar. You just like saw me post something and hopped here. So, but yeah, see everybody next week on Tuesday or next month, Tuesday instead of Wednesday.